Chair lays out House Bill 3089 by Representative Hull. So, oh yeah, there she is. And ask her to explain it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for allowing me to lay out HB 3089. Every school district is statutorily required to establish a school health advisory council to assist the district in ensuring that local community values are reflected in the district's health education instruction. There must be at least 5 members of the council, with the majority of the members being parents of students, and other members that may include teachers, counselors, administrators, students, licensed healthcare professionals, nonprofit representatives, business community members, the clergy, and law enforcement. These councils are responsible for providing recommendations to the Board of Trustees on health education curriculum and instruction on everything from nutrition services, substance abuse prevention, PE, and human sexuality. The council is required to meet 4 times per year to prepare their recommendations, which the district must consider when changing health education instruction. Because of the importance of the recommendations and the statutory direction to ensure that local community values are reflected in health education instruction, it is important that these meetings of the council are open to community participation. HB 3089 would require these quarterly meetings to be subject to Texas Open Meeting Act requirements, just as meetings of the district's Board of Trustees or any other governmental body are. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to lay out 3089. I'm happy to answer any questions and like to reserve my right to close.
Any questions for Representative Hull, members? Not hearing any, the chair gives you the right to close, and we'll proceed with the public testimony as this time. Chair calls Lori Kirkendall.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dutton and members. My name is Lori Kirkendall. I'm the President and CEO of Medical Institute for Sexual Health. I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 3089. So we are a science-based public health education and research organization founded here in Austin in 1992. I hold a degree in health education from A&M and a master's in public health. I'm also a proud mother, I would say, of 4 school children who came through Texas's public schools. Previously, I worked at Aim for Success. We are the state's largest provider of sex education programs in Texas. And over the last 25 years, I've worked with a number of different school health advisory councils across the state. And I'm in full support of this bill and the language it includes. SHACs were first written into the Education Code in 1995, as you've heard, to ensure local control over health education with specific direction given for human sexuality instruction. I've included the full 28004, as I refer to it, in the packet of information you've been given. The stipulations for the structure and function of SHACs were included with 2 goals: ensuring local community values are reflected in the health education instruction and describing opportunities for parental involvement in the development of the curriculum. Last November, you may be aware of, the State Board of Education completed an 18-month-long review and update of the health TEKS. I served on 3 TEA work groups and provided invited testimony to the board at their June public hearing. In the end, the board adopted new health TEKS that are consistent with Education Code here in 28004 and that uphold optimal health for all of Texas's 5 million school children. This bill requiring SHACs as open government meetings like the school boards that they serve is especially needed this year, as all SHACs will need to make local curriculum decisions to ensure that their curriculum meets the new TEKS, aligns with the Education Code, and most importantly reflects the local community values. This bill will help clarify the role of and strengthen the effectiveness of SHACs and assure they are compliant with their original intent. Thank you.
All right. Any questions of this witness, members? Not hearing any. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here. Chair calls Mary Castle.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dutton, members of the committee. My name is Mary Elizabeth Castle. I'm the Policy Advisor for Texas Values Action. In that role, I help parents utilize their access to education opportunities for their children. School health advisory councils, though voluntary, serve very important roles. They are in charge of selecting and suggesting materials that can either be highly controversial or highly influential in a public school student's healthy decisions. That said, parents should be able to attend these meetings, record meetings to share with other parents, and access any minutes of meetings that they miss so that they can be informed about their children and what they are learning. SHACs were created to reflect the views of the community, but over the years, several school districts have instead become the hangout for special interest groups and nonprofits. Some SHACs meet without notice and some meet in secret. Over a year ago, I experienced the changing roles and whims of the Austin ISD SHAC, where I helped organize a group of parents to voice their concerns about the selection of sex ed curriculum. The standing rule was that the first 5 people to sign up would testify. However, after the SHAC president noticed that some parents who opposed her had arrived early to be able to testify, the president made up a new rule that she would draw names from a hat. The names coincidentally were those of parents and friends of the president, and like-minded individuals who barely arrived on time for the meeting, while only one of the parents who arrived over an hour early was able to testify. This meeting was at their new building on I-35 that takes almost over an hour to get to. SHACs need order. Many do not want to hear from the community, and many try to hide what type of curriculum and topics they are discussing because they know that the parents do not agree. I recall one SHAC meeting where a member said parents need to be educated on what is good for their own children. But insinuating and assuming that most parents are ignorant is not only mean-spirited, but is not at the heart of Texas law that protects the parents as being the best advocate and in the best interests of their child. This bill will allow parents to have notice in meetings, rules, discussions, and decisions of SHACs. Parents, once again, will be in the driver's seat of their child's health decisions and education.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Any questions of this witness, members? Not hearing any. Thank you for being here. The chair calls Shannon Jacquet.
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Jacquet, and I am the Policy and Education Analyst at the Texas Catholic Conference of Bishops, and I am testifying in support of HB 3089. As the primary and principal educators of their children, parents have the right and responsibility to impart their values in all aspects of their children's education, particularly regarding human sexuality, which addresses questions about the fundamental nature and purpose of the human person. The state's role is secondary and serves to assist and support parents in the duty of educating their children. HB 3089 will vastly improve parents' ability to determine what, if any, human sexuality instruction is provided to their children by public schools. Making public the minutes of every meeting of the local School Health Advisory Council and requiring SHACs to hold public meetings that allow for public comment empowers parents to participate in the process of adopting curriculum and ensures that the values of local communities are respected. These provisions are a substantial improvement to current statute and enable parents to make an informed decision and, if necessary, opt their children out of human sexuality instruction. Pope Francis writes in his encyclical Amoris Laetitia, "The state offers educational programs in a subsidiary way, supporting the parents in their indeclinable role. Parents themselves enjoy the right to choose freely the kind of education which they wish to give their children in accordance with their convictions. Schools do not replace parents, but complement them." We believe Representative Hull's bill acknowledges and respects this, and that is why we support and urge you to pass HB 3089. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of this witness, members? I assume the local SHAC now is doing something you all don't like.
That is correct.
Okay. That'd be a good assumption. Okay. All right, any further questions, members? No, thank you very much for being here. Chair calls Deborah Simmons.
Hello. My name is Deborah Simmons, and I am an individual here for House Bill 3089. Thank you to Representative Hull for filing this important legislation. Thank you to the Chair and Committee for this hearing and the opportunity to discuss transparency issues around school health advisory councils, also known as SHACs in the state of Texas. All meetings of the council must be conducted in compliance with Chapter 551, Government Code, which refers to open meetings. This bill adds those words to Texas Education Code 28004. People are generally surprised to find out that SHACs are not required to comply with Open Meetings Act. I served almost 2 years on my district SHAC after the Board of Trustees disbanded and reorganized the district's council. In 2012, parents and citizens learned about SHACs after a recommendation was being considered by the Board of Trustees. We filed open records requests trying to find out when the SHAC meetings had been held, who attended the SHAC meetings, and what decisions had been made. We searched emails and meeting postings to figure out who had been notified about these meetings. The SHAC must provide advice to the district on coordinated school health programming and assist the district in ensuring that local community values are reflected in the district's health education instruction. This is an important council in each district doing important work. This bill will require each Texas school district to post notice of the date, hour, place, and subject 72 hours prior to the meeting, allow the public to attend and provide an opportunity for public comment, prepare and maintain minutes of the meeting that state the subject and content of each deliberation, and indicate each vote, order, decision, or other action taken by the council during the meeting. Please pass and support legislation for SHAC transparency. Thank you.
All right, any further questions of this witness, members? I think Representative Tallarico has a question.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was listening to some of the testimony and a lot about family values, community values, and I'm curious if you think when making health decisions, if we should be guided by science or community values.
Well, I do believe that we have a diverse opinion across the state of Texas and throughout the different school districts. Each school district would consider what their community values are when looking at health curriculum. When we look at what was adopted last year by the State Board of Education, 617 student expectations. Not all of those are science. Most of them are actually character. When we teach sex education, we often acknowledge that it's about 10% biology and 90% character. So we're not always talking about science-based questions in these health education discussions. Whether it's sex education or suicide or some of the other things, that it actually does come down to character in a lot of cases. And we should honor local control. And as a decentralist, I think that we should put that responsibility back to the districts and also equip them to be able to provide the best information to their communities and do the right thing so that both sides of the issues are addressed when they're addressing these sensitive topics.
Sure. On many scientific topics, there aren't two sides, at least not two valid sides. So if the best practice in terms of public health is to let teenagers know about contraception and how they can access contraception, especially if they're sexually active, if that's the best practice based on research and evidence and science, but a community doesn't believe in contraception, which one should we follow?
So this bill is about transparency, which means that that conversation can be had in the school district. So if they're having private meetings and they're closing it off to the public, then is that the right way to handle these meetings? They should be open to the public and allow the public to see the conversation and to actually have the dialogue like we are having. And that should be going on in the school districts in these important councils, regardless of whether we agree or disagree. And I've advised all school districts, or all parents throughout school districts that I talk to across the state, to always look for the best practices, not to look for just their values being represented or their value set being represented by the leadership. And so we want to make sure that those meetings are open so that the dialogue can happen and it's a healthy conversation rather than closing or preventing parents from participating.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with the need for transparency. I'm glad Representative Hull is bringing this bill because I do think transparency and accountability is important. I worry about turning conversations based on science and evidence and empirical research into a show of hands, right? Who believes in this? And that's, if we're making decisions about the health of our students, I think we should be guided by something more solid than public opinion.
I think we risk more chaotic situations when we don't follow the laws, particularly like Open Meetings Act. When the shacks are not structured in these ways, it actually becomes more chaotic rather than more structured.
I think Representative Bernal has a question.
You just said something that I thought was interesting. This is not my area, right? But shacks are advisory, right? They don't make decisions that a district or any particular teacher has to follow. So the decision to adopt their recommendations is at the trustee level, at the school board level, and
Yes.
those meetings are open. They are subject to the Open Meetings Act, and then so is it that this body in particular should be subject to open meetings, whereas other advisory councils are not, or are we expanding it to all advisory bodies being subject to the Open Meetings Act?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've only served on school health advisory councils, but let me share my perspective. There are school districts across the state who will receive recommendations from their shacks and they'll rubber stamp them. So they don't even review the recommendation. It's provided, sometimes I've seen it in a consent calendar agenda item and just literally passed through. So accountability is another feature that I look for when I'm talking to people about legislation. This is just a transparency bill, but it's still a very good bill.
But it's transparency for the sake of involvement, interaction. And I guess you've got elected representatives who they've signed up for that. Right, they've signed up to be interacted with, and
Yes.
you can go to the meeting and talk about something, even if it's on the consent agenda. I guess I'm curious about what makes this advisory group different than any other advisory group, and why they wouldn't also be subject to open meetings. And I guess as a parent, like, I mean, someone who's very young, so I'm kind of trying not to think about it right now, but I don't know how you ever get this right. In other words, on this subject, you know, regardless of where you are in Texas, that there's going to be differing opinions on this, right? There just is. How do you structure this in a way where you get whatever the desired outcome is?
Well, I'm not sure about the question of the desired outcome, right?
Well,
I mean, it all goes back to parents, right, and parental responsibility. And the law in 28004 is very good about allowing parental rights for opt-out.
Right.
I will note that there's very little enforcement in education code, at least from my observation, 28004 in particular. I've been speaking to people I've been doing this for 8.5 years, basically. And school districts across the state break 28004 regularly. They don't comply with the law. This is interesting because I'm wondering about the enforcement ability of the Open Meetings Act because it's an education code rather than the government code. And then yet I still think that this is a step in the right direction for transparency. I'd love to speak more about the accountability issues and the fact that the school board members are not always representing, or the decisions that are being made in these shacks sometimes are not traceable or accountable back to the voter, which is really what we want, right? Because the school board is accountable to the voter. But if these decisions are sometimes being made within the shack and just with the administration, that can be a problem too. So there are some best practices that should be followed for accountability.
And my last question is how, in an unelected body that's advisory, what sort of accountability would a voter be able to exercise over that body, with the exception of maybe disruption?
So not to distract from this bill, I'm very much for this bill. For example, Senate Bill 442 that Senator Hughes has been working through the Senate, and the companion has been filed by the chair, 3872. It actually has an interesting accountability requirement because we actually have problems with the appointments that are made. So who is on the shack? Who decides who's on the shack? So for example, in my school district, it was whoever showed up at the meetings. So then you have to go back to, well, who knew about the meetings because of it wasn't being the notices weren't being publicized. So whoever showed up was able to vote. So in 442 and House Bill 3872, there's actually a requirement that every member
I
of
would
the
caution you to just talk about this bill at the moment, because those other two bills are not before
Sorry.
us. And you don't want to,
Like I appreciate your responses and how thorough you know what I just, it's advisory. And so I think that we have to sort of be careful about what this would mean for every otherwise advisory body that lends itself to helping out or is it advising good or
Right.
bad advice to a school district.
So if the Board of Trustees is appointing every single member, then there is accountability.
Okay.
But if they're not,
all right. Any further questions, members? No further questions. Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
Chair calls Denise Seibert.
My name is Denise Seibert. I'm representing myself. I support HB 3089 because of what she pointed out to, that Education Code, Section 28004, says a local school health advisory council, or SHAC, and health education instruction. It states the Board of Trustees of each school district shall establish a local health advisory council to assist the district in ensuring that the local community values are reflected in the district's health education instruction. And I agree with that because a lot of groups have been sneaking in and bringing in people, I've heard, into their groups. And because I suffered an abortion through Planned Parenthood without any information of any other choices, wasn't even given the how far along I was, wasn't told risks, wasn't told procedures. You know, I see Planned Parenthood coming in and becoming part of this SHAC board and then doing things under secret that just, they're trying to make a plan. And the plan is to be the children's friends. And so to me, this code 28004 is plain and simple. The community values are reflected. You can only reflect the community values with parents of students of the school or people from the community as part of the SHAC. The meeting should be open, should be announced, so that the parents as well as the local community members can attend the SHAC meetings. And in compliance with Chapter 551, the Government Code states the meeting should have a quorum of governing body open to the public, and a quorum is the majority. And recording tangible medium with audio or a combination audio-video for recording, because sometimes parents aren't able to make it on time, and, you know, no longer in secret. That this should be the standard for the SHAC. That there are too many secret meetings in the past and a stacking of the deck when it comes to the members. And so please pass this bill. And I also found out from a friend that schools are implementing programs that promote LBGT and all that. So please pass this bill. Thank you.
Okay. What district are you from?
I'm not from a district. I'm from Bell County,
Bell County.
and I'm just a concerned parent and grandparent.
Okay, and Bell County has a school district,
Yes.
and they have a shack?
Yes, I believe so. I haven't been part of one, but I know the agenda of Planned Parenthood, that they have been trying to get into as many shacks as they can to promote themselves.
So you're not part of the shack in Bell County?
No, I'm part of I do volunteer at a pregnancy center.
Okay, and so this is what you're testifying today on, based on what you've heard about?
What I've heard, yes. And the one lady that I know couldn't make it today, and so.
Okay. I think we got it. Any other questions of this witness, members? No, thank you for being here.
Thank
And
you.
thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
That's the last witness. Is there anyone else here who would like to testify for, on, or against House Bill 3089? Not hearing any, the chair recognizes Representative Hull to close.
Members, clearly there are many concerns about these committees. My bill does not attempt to address those concerns. It is simply about open government, and I made a lot of notes of some questions that were asked. One, their licensed healthcare professionals can be on a SHAC, and so they can have that input. The community values part, that's in statute. So I know that word has been used a lot, but it's because it's in how the school, the SHAC to assist the district in ensuring that local community values are reflected in the district's health education instruction. So to me, that's really just community involvement. The other part, about other advisory councils, that already exists. So HHSC has advisory councils, and they are subject to open meetings. Everything from sickle cell, HIV, youth camps, and they all are subject to open meetings. Let's see. And I know a lot of the focus today had a lot to do with sex ed, but SHACs go way beyond that. And PE, substance abuse, nutrition, all of those things. So it's just about open government, community involvement, and really civic participation at the most local level. And so if there's no more questions, I close.
Any other questions? I think Mr. Bell has a question.
Representative Hull, I just pulled it up, went to 2804, and that's 3 or 4 pages worth of responsibilities for these health advisory councils, and you just pointed it out. You know, besides the health and sex education, it's also PE, also the comprehensive school counseling program. So these actually dictate what we do with the counselors and we've talked a lot about mental health and those kind of things, and it's the counselors that are over the mental health in our school districts. Right. And so, and to your point, and I was going to mention this, but I served on the TDLR Electrical Advisory Board for a long time, and our meetings were subject to the Open Records Act as well. So anyway, thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else have a question? All right, Ms. Buckley has a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Hull, when you look at the multitude of issues that a SHAC deals with, and we have them, in Killeen ISD and various of the districts that I represent, sometimes I think the community, especially when it comes to things, and we heard some great testimony in other bills today about mental health and anxiety that students are suffering, and really these I think well-meaning committees often operate, though they operate kind of in a vacuum where nobody knows much about them. So I was wondering if you intend that through this process we'd be able to allow community members to bring concerns about the health, especially following a pandemic, of students, and they could begin to respond to that if there was more community awareness of exactly what was going on.
Yes, and that's part of mental health, and all of that's part of what's covered in the SHAC. So it would be great for them for parents and the community to be able to come and express their concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Representative Hull, members? Not hearing any. Thank you. It's the chair's intent to leave House Bill 3089 as a matter of pending business before the full committee without objection. So ordered.